As we speak today, I wish we could be discussing this Bank of Ghana thing. This,
right.
Yeah, you will notice that if you read the report, I intentionally wrote to the governor of 48 billion.
Yes.
You remember
break it down.
Government.
Yes.
Government came to say that it was doing a DDEP, a domestic debt exchange program, which will lead to them surrounding the old debt
yes.
for new debts.
Yes.
And as a result of that, government said, write off 32 billion. We can't pay forever.
Yes.
No matter what you do, we can't pay. So when you
that's like a haircut.
Yeah. So when you take a haircut of 32 billion, what it technically means is that it is off your books. So it doesn't affect the next year's.
It's a bad debt.
It's a bad debt. So you write it off, and then you bring your debt to those a level other than that. Then.
So the central bank took a haircut of 32 billion for 2022.
2022.
Okay.
Now, then they say that because they have reduced the interest rate at which they are now paying you, the coupons on the bond is now lower than the previous one. What you do is that you do what we call net present value analysis. You decide that if you are going to collect those monies 5 years, 6 years, 8 years, if you were to discount them by a factor back to this day, what would be the value? And when you did that and you compared it to what is sitting on your books, you realize that the value had declined by about 16 billion.
By virtue of the reduction in the interest
rate.
Okay.
So because of that, the value, if you hold it to maturity, it will no longer be that, but it will be less by 16
billion.
So the 16 billion is what we call impairment.
Right.
So what you do is that you automatically write them, the two of them, you put them together and write them off.
So that's like a 50% of the previous haircut.
Exactly.
Okay.
You put them together and write it off as part of your expenditure.
That gives you 48 billion.
48 billion. Okay. You write them off as part of your expenditure. In the new report, you are now saying that the impairment has increased to 53 billion.
New report for year 2023.
2023.
Okay.
The impairment has increased to 53 billion.
So what accounts for the 5 billion?
Good. But it's not even 5 billion.
Okay.
If you understand the breakdown I did, the impairment is 16 billion to 53 billion. Because the 32 billion is written off.
Okay.
Good. So your impairment is now 37 billion more.
As a result of what?
That is the question. Now you give me a breakdown. And in the breakdown, you say that because of you had some exposure to cocoa board. And cocoa board also, the government also did DDEP on cocoa board bills. Because of that, you lost value of 606 million. That one you have reported in your expenditure.
Which is less than $1 billion.
Which is less than $1 billion. You have reported that. Okay. The additional 37 billion, we don't see it.
It's not in the report.
It's not in the report.
So how did the did the auditors qualify the
They didn't. That is why I'm saying that that report was cooked.
Wow.
And it is the reason
they didn't qualify it.
They didn't qualify it. They just said that there's an impairment of 53 billion, but you don't trace it to the operational expenditures.
That's what the auditors said.
Oh yes, I want to show you the operational expenditures. It's in their notes. And I wanted to be sure.
Is it the same response?
Yeah, that is the same report. I wanted to be sure that what I'm seeing is what it is. Impairment loss securities, that's government securities, is 606,222,000. Does that look like 53 billion?
It's less than $1 billion.
And then you see on that line,
they
treat impairment for 2022 at 48 billion.
But Randy, wouldn't it be? No, wait. Just indulge me. Don't you think it to be appropriate because they've written to you? At least to get
it is the same report they have
No, I'm saying that, the reason why these impairments occurred.
No, I haven't asked them about impairment. I just said, give me a certified copy.
What they requested was for this document.
And I have it. So I will ask them about this impairment later.
Then ask them before talking about them.
Why? I'm a professional myself. I'm a chartered accountant.
No, it's possible.
And I don't know how auditors will give me a footnote of 53 billion impairment. And the previous impairment include a write-off of 32 billion. And they do a reconciliation to arrive at 606 million as the impairment for this year.
No, but you just said that there is some 48 billion.
No, the 48 billion is 20. You see, there's always what do you call it? Comparative analysis.
Okay.
You compare to last year. So last year, you reported in the comparative 48 billion.
Okay.
It has moved to 53 billion. But here we see that the comparatives are not matching. It is now 660.
So the point you make is that what is happening in 2023 is not an addition to the 48 in 2022.
So what they have done
Yes.
is that they have simply picked the new figure of 606 million of cocoa board.
Yes.
And put it in the accounts.
Yeah, but
what drove the figure to 53 billion? That 53 billion is not reflecting in that.
so what I want to understand is,
Yes.
are you looking for a difference from 48 to 53?
Yes. I'm looking for a difference from 16 to 53. Because if you describe it as impairment,
And you're saying that the only thing they've provided is the
606,
which is cocoa board.
which is cocoa board.
And in all the footnotes, there's nothing
There's nothing.
that describes how
In fact,
that extra has.
You see this figure, that where I'm picking from. It is about the operating expenses.
Yes.
This is carried to affect your revenue.
Yes.
So if you don't put it here, where will you put it? You put it in the expenses, the operational costs, so that when you net it against your revenue, the effect will already show in your profit or loss.
But
So the reason they got 10 billion is because the impairment has been cooked by 37 billion.
but how does the reporting standard say we should report this?
What? Which one?
What you're talking about, the impairment.
Yes.
The reporting standards clearly states how these things ought to be
Yes, that's what I'm
reported.
saying. So the impairment is treated as expenditure.
Yes. And you say you can't find
I
it.
can't find it. I find 606 million.
Okay.
But you have told me in your footnote that your impairment is 53 billion. In fact, you give me a schedule of your exposure to government of Ghana. And in that exposure, you come down to net of 53 billion and get a balance of about 60 billion.
So
when
the,
you net
the net of 53 billion is specific to the year 2023.
Exactly.
Has nothing to do with preceding years.
No.
Because it is for that year.
It's for that year. But it would include
Previous.
the impairment of 16 billion.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah. New DDEP, the interest rates and tenor and all that.
Exactly.
When you recalculate, you would have a loss of 16 billion.
Yes, 16 billion.
16 billion.
For the old,
Yes.
plus an addition, which drives the figure to 53.
So I'm coming.
Good.
So that's 16 billion. It is the difference between that 16 billion and the 53 billion,
Which is missing.
which is what the report does not tell us. The report only mentions a 606.
Yes.
For the cocoa board,
For the
606.
cocoa board, yes.
Which means that there is some
37.
37 plus,
Yeah, 37.
which we are
Which
not
is
told
not here.
about.
So your loss for the year is 47 billion. My brother, not 10 billion.
But you said the auditors wrote something.
What
That
the
you couldn't find this, you couldn't find that figure somewhere, the 50 something.
You see, in their
Because
notes,
I asked you whether they qualified it or not. You
no,
said
they didn't qualify the account.
Yes.
They didn't qualify. They only stated. They actually gave a table where they listed all the government of Ghana, Bank of Ghana exposure to government of Ghana. Listed all of them and took out the 53 billion as an impairment. Then they analyzed their operational costs. But when it came to their operational costs, you cannot reconcile the impairment figure with the impairment figure of 53 billion they are reporting and taking out of the investment. Are you getting the point?
Yes.
That is intentional. That is, Randy, it means that even after DDEP, Bank of Ghana is still bleeding. Your old bonds, they've taken them away. They have given you new bonds, which are now effective and running. And within 1 year, there is an impairment that pushes it to 53 billion. What is happening? How can new bonds suddenly start losing value? Is it that government has already defaulted in paying you? In which case, the auditors or you yourself, you have made judgment that you are unlikely to receive the flows. And for that reason, you have decided to affect the impairment.
So you are alleging two things. You make a claim that it's either that the central bank is concealing information, or it's is either concealing information or it's cooking the books.
They are cooking the books. I have told you that. Because your operational expenses include a line for impairment. I cannot relate that impairment to the impairment that you are reporting in the note. The impairment that you are reporting in the note is 53 billion.
Will this document, this report, will it include the management report?
Yeah, it will include.
I ask because the management report would then tell us some of the queries that the auditors.
No, they will not include
management
that.
Letter. Because I wanted to find out whether indeed the auditors raised this issue.
Yes.
Because I'm surprised.
You can ask for that.
If indeed this discrepancy, if what you're talking about is the case, I'll be surprised that they didn't qualify it.
Yes.
And that is why I asked about the management letter to find out if the auditors even, first of all, identified this and whether they raised it as part of
the response.
And the response from the central bank.
So that one, they didn't include.
Are you not done?
And obviously they will. Oh, why do you want me to be done? There's a lot to discuss. There's a lot to discuss here, Randy.
Yeah, but
so I have explained.
I'll
I have explained to you that these accounts were cooked.
They were cooked.
Yes.
This is a very serious allegation.
Yes, a serious one. And it's the reason I wrote, because I wanted to be sure. And they were cooked because the impairment value that is reported in the note cannot be reconciled to the impairment value reported in the operational expenses. And that there's a gap of about 37 billion, which should have hit the loss of the company, of the bank. What it then means is that about 37 billion of your loss is unaccounted for. And 37 billion of your negative net worth is still unaccounted for.
So what will account for this 37 billion? Is it that irrespective of the zero financing, the central bank was still financing, or that the new bonds had occasioned the loss far in excess of the 16 billion?
Randy, what I suspect is that the terms under which government entered the DDEP with the Bank of Ghana were subsequently varied. Were subsequently varied.
Subsequently varied?
Yes. Because you see, you can't have it. Other that, or those bonds did not perform. They started defaulting on them. And because they started defaulting on them, they needed to make a judgment as to the recoverability of those monies. And it is the reason they will impair those assets.
Yeah, but the financials must tell us that.
Yeah, that's the point.
There must be clarity as far as the financials are concerned.
So, you see, the financial reporting, the IFRS 9,
yes.
The IFRS 9 tells you that immediately a loan, there's a default on the loan, whether interest or principal. You must begin to recognize the entire loan as a loan at risk. Are you getting the point? It is the reason you can have a new bond restated and reorganized in the accounts, suddenly suffering impairment. Do you get my point? That is the only reason. Otherwise, it should be current and performing and should not be subject to this level of impairment. You know, so that is the first point. Now, the second point is that the 2022 Bank of Ghana exposure to government was 111 billion. But you are reporting 114 billion. As a matter of fact,
where did you get the 111 from?
They are all in the report.
And where did you get the 114 from?
The same report. There's an analysis of the various composition of government of Ghana debt. Long-term debt, which is about 12 point something billion. Short-term securities, which is about 79 billion. It moved from 67 billion to 79 billion. And you claim that you are doing zero financing.
Where will location that jump?
It means you are still lending to government. You are also busy buying government treasury bills.
Whoa.
That's what you are doing. That's why your exposure on the short end moves from 67 to 79. So who are you deceiving? Who are you deceiving? Then subtract, which gave you 114. And then you subtracted the 53 that you call the impairment. You didn't subtract 606. You subtracted 53 billion from it to get a balance of about 60 billion. Randy, what that means is that, you see, if you do very basic accounting, you understand that investment is a debit balance. Do you get it? To reduce it, you must put a credit and net off the difference. And when you put the credit, the debit must go to an account. That account is the operational expenses account.
Yeah.
And it is not sitting there. So how is that possible? So you cook the accounts. They cooked it.
Who are the directors of the central bank?
There are many of them. All the three governors are on that board. It is the only government agency where the managing director is the board chairman.
That's the act. So
Yeah,
the law.
I'm not saying he is wrong. I mean, that's what the law says you should do. But he's the board member. He's the board chair.
Yeah, but I'm just asking who the directors are, because the directors ought to know the implications of this.
In fact, the auditors.
No, I'm saying the directors first, before the auditors.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that.
Yes.
The auditors flagged the 53 billion impairment as a critical audit matter.
Yes, they did.
They did. And yet, if you flag it in the narrative, and it did not affect the accounts.
How did they? That's the question I was asking you. How did they flag it in the narrative? What did they say? What was said?
So in the narrative, they mentioned that the bank incurred an impairment in Government of Ghana securities of about 53 billion.
Yes.
And that poses a question to the going concern of the Bank of Ghana.
So it's stated in the report.
It's stated in the
what
report.
You're saying.
Yes. But you see, the audit query is emanating from the impact of that item on the account.
So although they made this observation,
it did not affect in the account.
They did not qualify the account to.
Not at all.
In fact, don't qualify the audit.
If you read the section where they are discussing we call it the going concern of the bank.
Yes.
They raise all the negative issues, but they don't make a conclusion.
Yeah.
You raise all the negative issues that are very, very significant. You get a point? And yet, you do not even qualify the account. And you do not make a conclusive observation. Now, what they sought to do was now move to what we call policy solvency of the central bank. The policy solvency is to say that whether the central bank, in its operation, is able to generate enough financial resources or revenue to support its expenditures incurred in managing monetary policy. And even there, you see, Randy, your solvency policy, what do you call it, a factor, was about 1.4 billion in 2022 in the heat of the DDP. Now it has declined to 461 million. Almost 1 billion is gone. Shouldn't that scare you? Shouldn't that tell you that we are heading towards insolvency? And yet, you don't make any pronouncement on that. And I'm saying that the auditors must be explaining how they got 606 million out of 53 billion to report as an impairment value in the account, thereby arriving and certifying a loss of 10.4 billion when it should have been far, far higher. In fact, they certified a net, negative net worth of about 64 billion when it should have been closer to 80 billion or even 100 billion. Do you get the point? So that major factor should have driven the Bank of Ghana's name somewhere else. And that is why they decided to temper it. Randy, another one is that you hear we complain that you are broke. So slow down in this building of projects. The commitment, as reported in this account for Bank of Ghana, capital commitment. In other words, projects that the central bank is implementing, like their office building, moved from 711 million to 936 million. A difference of over 220 million. What that means is that they are awarding new contracts.
Or maybe the valuations for the current ones have changed.
Oh, so they keep adjusting the figure.
It is possible.
So if they keep adjusting the figure, that would be.
If you look at the history of the headquarters, it shouldn't be surprising that it could be changing.
But that's
Do you appreciate what I'm saying?
200 million more.
But he knows, but
No, 220 million more for somebody who is broke. Somebody, you see, Randy, I hear them saying that we need to recapitalize the Bank of Ghana, and they need government to recapitalize. Why should government recapitalize you? You are in this situation because government is owing you and say write off 32 billion. And government not paying you is leading to an impairment of 53 billion. Is that not it? If government gives you your 53 billion, won't you be solvent? Won't you be recapitalized? So why are you not going for your money? I owe you money. I'm the owner. I owe you money. I have not paid the money. As a result of that, you cannot also pay the people who owe you. Then you come and tell me that the owner, can you increase the capital so that I can pay these people? Instead of telling them that, look, the money you took is not for us. It's for some people. Bring our money. When they give you the money, won't you be able to now pay the people? So this conversation around recapitalization, I can't just understand it. Randy, beyond that one, I have explained to you that in this country, if you read all the issuance calendar, we have a specification of a 2-year bond. It is always up to 1-year note because the capital market is not willing to give them money, the domestic capital market. So where did they borrow the additional 148 billion from? I told you earlier that if you read the report, bond market, they will tell you that the government, the government of Ghana bonds listed on the stock exchange increased from 160 billion to 308.9 billion. Good. And I'm saying that you are not issuing new bonds. You are not also opening old bonds. All you are telling us is that you are issuing treasury bills. So where did you get those bonds that you listed from? And who bought them? Are you doing something behind our back? And where does this amount reflect in our deficit? What did you use it to finance?
That is a huge figure.
A huge figure. Randy, this is what is happening. It is in their own report, too, and they have even gone ahead to diagram it. There's a diagram. If you look here, there's a diagram there. They've diagrammed it. And they are boldly saying that they moved from 160 to 308.9 billion.
Million or billion?
Billion. Billion. These people do not know million. When they are chopping, they chop big. Billion. 160 billion to 308.9 billion. I am not saying it. This is the report from the directors of Bank of Ghana.
You're giving me a migraine.
Randy, it was these things that made me to say that, look, I want to be sure we are speaking from the same hymn book. Otherwise, you say that this is a cooked document I saw. It's becoming very scary. Very difficult to deal with this book. You read the going concern. See what they are saying there. But they are not making the pronouncement that should result from the kind of picture they are painting. You are painting this terrible picture. And you still cannot tell us whether the Bank of Ghana's going concern is affected or not. So, Randy, all I can say is that, look, this is a 53 billion. You can see it there. The table there.
Impairments.
It's not 53. I'm not the one put it there. But look through the accounts. Let me give you the operational expenditures. If you see 53 billion, you're a magician. You won't see anything like that. Look, you see impairment loss, 606 million. These are financial engineers. And I'm worried that the auditors are certifying this.
So on page 58,
yes,
key audit matter,
yes,
impairment of investments in government securities.
Yes.
And then if you look at the table, 2023, you have a gross amount of 114.
Yes.
Then less impairment, 53,772.
Good.
Okay. Then that gives you a net amount of 60,281.
Yes.
Okay. Then when you go to page 63, it gives you consolidated and separate statement of profit and loss. Profit or loss, sorry.
Yes.
And then you come to impairment, recovery stroke, loss, loans and advances, 231. Then impairment loss, securities.
That's the government one.
606,228.
See the comparative analysis for 2002.
2002, 48.
Yes.
401,181.
So you see, if we were dealing with like items,
yes,
the 2002 should be nil, because this is in respect of
2022
should have been zero, because it is in respect of COCOBOD.
Yeah.
You treat like items. So once you are treating impairment generally, it should reflect the 53.
So what they are telling us here in the consolidated and separate statement of profit or loss is that impairment loss,
yes,
as a result of securities was 606 million, as against 48 billion, sorry,
yeah,
401 million for 2022.
Yes.
However, when it comes to page 58, the key audit matter.
Yes.
For 2023, we are told that impairments. So they do long-term government securities,
yes,
12.5 billion. Money market instruments, 79 billion.
Look at the comparative figure for 2002.
So
2022.
For which one?
For the
money market.
The
money market instruments, 79 billion for 2023, 67 billion for 2022.
How did they move there when you are doing
zero financing? So you have an increase of about 22 billion.
Yes.
32 billion, sorry.
32 billion.
For 2023.
Under zero financing. If it was not zero,
then the impairment here is 53 billion. A loss of 53 billion.
Yes.
That's on page 58.
Yes. And yet
but when you come to page 63,
yeah,
the statement of profit or loss, the impairment there is 606 million.
Randy.
So there's about 52.4 billion or so,
yeah,
which you don't find here.
Yeah, but then you can net off 16 billion of impairment from last year, since it is a moving target.
How do we resolve this?
Resolve it. I'll write to the auditor.
Who is the auditor?
Deloitte and Touche.
So Deloitte and Touche did this, yes, the auditor Bank of Ghana.
Maybe I'm not understanding something.
Okay. Let's just hope so.
I'm not understanding something. I'll write to them.
All right.
You know, last year I had issue with them when I said that you can't write off the 32 billion because Bank of Ghana is a covered entity. Under
covered entity meaning?
Covered entity is an entity that is supposed to be regulated by the Public Financial Management Act.
Okay.
And it defines covered entity in the definitions as autonomous bodies, constitutional bodies. And we know that Bank of Ghana is the constitutional autonomous body. And in that Public Financial Management Act, it says that you cannot write off any government of Ghana asset without one, recourse to Parliament, for Parliament to take a decision and pass a resolution by a simple majority, identifying all the assets and what they have approved to be written off. So the auditors should have known that in terms of legal compliance, writing off 32 billion was illegal.
Have you seen the latest World Bank report?
Yes.
That has dropped. That says that Ghana has dropped from C in 2021 to D in the World Bank's 2024 assessment of the independence of audit institutions in Ghana.
Yes, I've seen that.
Have you seen that?
I've seen
what
that.
does it mean?
So there's an
we've dropped from C to D.
Yeah, there's an assessment that is done by the World Bank in terms of what we call the assurance institutions. Those institutions that must be the safeguards to tell us whether we can rely. So for this report, from what I'm saying, it says that I'm simply saying I cannot rely on this report. Okay, I cannot rely on this report because of discrepancy, material discrepancies.
So the World Bank
does that assessment,
lowered our ranking.
Yes.
In 2021, we were C.
It means our independence.
It now says D for audit institutions in Ghana.
Yes, their independence.
That's a serious indictment.
Serious indictment. It means that we can't even trust the
and this is the World Bank.
Yes, we can't trust the auditors.
Dropping us from C to D.
To D. We are deteriorating on everything. Randy, you see these audits that they are conducting at Bank of Ghana. If the NDC comes to power and I have a say to advise.
Are you going to threaten people?
And I have a say to advise. We will conduct a forensic audit into this. We won't rely on these reports. These reports, for me, they don't comply with basic standard of audit.
IFRS?
Basic standards. Because, you see, there are material matters, significant matters, 53 billion. What is the total budget of Ghana? What is our annual budget? I think it's a 200 and something billion. A quarter, about a quarter of our budget is the figure you are referring to. And you do not think that this is such a material fact that you should qualify the account. In fact, you assist them to exclude it from the account so that we don't see the effect on it on the account. And we are roaming around. It has come down from how much? Was it 50 billion, 60 billion to 10 billion? You see, what he doesn't know is that when you make a loss, you don't pack it and forget it all. It accumulates. Unless you make profit to clear it, anytime you add losses, it accumulates. So it is not your negative position. It's not 10 billion. It's 60 billion. That is even if I take on the face of this account without adjusting for the matters that I have raised. And you are comfortable to be pronouncing that a bank of Ghana that moves from a negative net worth of 60 billion is better than a net worth of about 70 billion. That's what you're simply telling us.